Hello and welcome to our School at Home class in English Grade 10. We are in the third quarter of our set of lessons and I hope everybody will be delighted today in learning lesson number 2. Critiquing a literary selection based on the following approach. Moralist. After going through this lesson, you are expected to distinguish the elements such as characters, setting, plot, theme of the literary selection, and critique a literary selection based on the following approach. Moralist. To begin, let us do the following exercise. Pause the video if you need more time to answer. Then press play again if you are finished answering the activity. Complete the sentence by identifying what is being asked in the given sentence. Choose your answers from the box below. Number 1. Blank is the main theme of Kate Chopin's The Story of an Hour. 2. The cause of Mrs. Mallard's death is blank. 3. Mrs. Mallard grieved in her room for only blank. 4. Kate Chopin used blank person narration in The Story of an Hour. 5. Of the joy that kills means that Mrs. Mallard died of blank. Here are the answers. 1. Freedom. 2. Third. 3. Heart disease. 4. 1 hour. And last number 5. Great joy. In the previous lesson, you have learned that in order to fully understand the story, you should know its elements. Let's have a short review on these elements by doing this exercise. Identify the element being defined in each number. Choose the letter of the correct answer. 1. It gives the time and the place the story takes place. A. Characters. B. Setting. C. Plot. 2. They are the people, animals, or creatures in the story. A. Theme. B. Characters. C. Mood. 3. It provides the most important events in the story. A. Setting. B. Plot. C. Theme. 4. It is the central idea of the story. A. Theme. B. Mood. C. Tone. 5. This element is the major problem in the story. A. Climax. B. Theme. Or C. Conflict. Time's up. Let us check and here are the correct answers. 1B, 2B, 3B, 4A, and last number 5, C. One can discover the world through reading. Reading is the way to explore and to learn more about life. The most important thing that a reader learns is the moral value that each story presents. If you have lost someone and felt freedom for a short time, which one would you choose? Grieve for the person you love or enjoy the freedom? Today, you will discover and learn more about life by reading the literary selection of Kate Chopin's short story entitled The Story of an Hour. Knowing that Mrs. Mallard was afflicted with a heart trouble, great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. It was her sister Josephine who told her in broken sentences, veiled hints that revealed in half concealing. Her husband's friend Richard was there too near her. It was he who had been in the newspaper office when intelligence of the railroad disaster was received, with Brentley Mallard's name leading the list of killed. He had only taken the time to assure himself of its truth by a second telegram, and had hastened to forestall any less careful, less tender friend in bearing the sad message. She did not hear the story as many women have heard the same, with a paralyzed inability to accept its significance. She wept at once with sudden, wild abandonment in her sister's arms. When the storm of grief had spent itself, she went away to her room alone. She would have no one follow her. There stood, facing the open window, a comfortable, roomy armchair. Into this she sank, pressed down by a physical exhaustion that haunted her body and seemed to reach into her soul. She could see in the open square before her house the tops of trees that were all aquiver with a new spring light. The delicious breath of rain was in the air. In the street below, a peddler was crying his wares. The notes of a distant song which someone was singing reached her faintly, and countless sparrows were twittering in the eaves. There were patches of blue sky showing here and there through the clouds that had met and piled one above the other in the west facing her window. She sat with her head thrown back upon the cushion of the chair, quite motionless, except when a sob came up into her throat and shook her, as a child who has cried itself to sleep continues to sob in its dreams. She was young, with a fair, calm face, whose lines bespoke repression and even a certain strength. But now, there was a dull stare in her eyes, whose gaze was fixed away off yonder on one of those patches of blue sky. It was not a glance of reflection, but rather indicated a suspension of intelligent thought. There was something coming to her and she was waiting for it fearfully. What was it? She did not know. It was too subtle and elusive to name, but she felt it, creeping out of the sky, reaching toward her through the sounds, the scents, the color that filled the air. Now her bosom rose and fell tumultuously. She was beginning to recognize this thing that was approaching to possess her, and she was striving to beat it back with her will, as powerless as her two white slender hands would have been. When she abandoned herself, a little whispered word escaped her slightly parted lips. She said it over and over under the breath. Free! 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 The vacant stare and the look of terror that had followed it went from her eyes. They stayed keen and bright. Her pulses beat fast, and the coursing blood warmed and relaxed every inch of her body. She did not stop to ask if it were or were not a monstrous joy that held her. A clear and exalted perception enabled her to dismiss the suggestion as trivial. She knew that she would weep again when she saw the kind, tender hands folded in death, the face that had never looked save with love upon her, fixed and grey and dead. But she saw beyond that bitter moment a long procession of years to come that would belong to her absolutely, and she opened and spread her arms out to them in welcome. There would be no one to live for during those coming years. She would live for herself. There would be no powerful will bending hers in that blind persistence with which men and women believe they have a right to impose a private will upon a fellow creature. A kind intention or a cruel intention made the act seem no less a crime as she looked upon it in that brief moment of illumination. And yet, she had loved him. Sometimes. Often she had not. What did it matter? What could love, the unsolved mystery, count for in the face of this possession of self-assertion which she suddenly recognized as the strongest impulse of her being? Free, body and soul free, she kept whispering. Josephine was kneeling before the closed door with her lips to the keyhole, imploring for admission. Louise, open the door, I beg. Open the door. You will make yourself ill. What are you doing, Louise? For heaven's sake, open the door. Go away, I am not making myself ill. No, she was drinking in a very elixir of life through that open window. Her fancy was running riot along those days ahead of her. Spring days and summer days and all sorts of days that would be her own. She breathed a quick prayer that life might be long. It was only yesterday she had thought with a shudder that life might be long. She arose at length and opened the door to her sister's importunities. There was a feverish triumph in her eyes, and she carried herself unwittingly like a goddess of victory. She clasped her sister's waist, and together they descended the stairs. Richard stood waiting for them at the bottom. Someone was opening the front door with a latchkey. It was Bentley Mallard who entered, a little travel-stained, composedly carrying his gripsack and umbrella. He had been far from the scene of the accident and did not even know there had been one. He stood amazed at Josephine's piercing cry. At Richards's quick motion to screen him from the view of his wife. When the doctors came, they said she had died of heart disease, of the joy that kills. Remember that the main elements of a short story are the following: characters, the persons, animals, or creatures in the story; setting, the time and the place when and where the story happened; plot, the important events in the story; theme, the main or central idea of the story; conflict, the problem in the story; mood, the emotion created by the reader; tone, the way the author expressed his literary work. Now that you have read the story and identified the elements of a short story, let us explore it by identifying some of its elements. Who do you think is the protagonist in the story? How would you characterize her? That's great! Mrs. Mallard is the protagonist, and she is a loving and caring wife who experiences conflict with her identity when she finds out that her husband died. How about the setting of the story? When and where the story happened? Great job! The story happened in Mrs. Mallard's room for only an hour. What is the main theme of the story? How significant it is in the character of Mrs. Mallard? That's a good answer. Freedom is the main theme of the story, since Mrs. Mallard experiences conflict with her identity after finding out her husband's death. This only showed that even if she loves her husband so much and grieves for him, she feels free from her marriage at the same time. To have a further understanding of the story and test what you have learned, do the following activities. You may pause this video and get a pen and paper to write your answers. When you're done, play the video again and check your answers. Begin with the first activity. Identify the figure of speech used in each sentence. Choose the answer from the choices below. Time's up. Here are the answers. 1 simile, 2 metaphor, 3 personification, 4 simile, and 5 simile. For the second activity, arrange the order of events that took place in the story by numbers. Again, you may pause this video and use the same paper to write your answers. When you're done, resume the video and check your own work. Time's up. Here are the answers. 1, 3, 2, 5, 3, 4, 4, 1, and 5, 2. For the third activity, complete the critic map of the story of an hour by answering the given questions in each part of the map. Use a sheet of paper for your answers. To wrap everything that we have talked about in this lesson, let us do this activity. Complete the chart by filling out the elements of the story of an hour. During the 19th century, most women have limited rights as compared to today. Most of them are completely housewives and feel oppressed. However, modern women have the same rights as of men. They can also do a lot of work that men can do. In what way would you appreciate women who are still being oppressed today? Now, let us check how much you have learned from today's lesson by answering the last activity. Read each sentence and choose the letter of the correct answer. Let's check if you got the correct answers. 1A, 2C, 3B, 4B, and 5A. I hope that you have learned a lot after viewing and listening to this video lesson.